Welcome to episode 147 of the Loane Hockey Podcast, where today we're going to be talking about some standouts from last night's matchup between Columbus and Chicago. And so, with that matchup, it was really interesting because Columbus ended up taking it. They ended up winning, I believe it was 6-3 in total, and that was the final score. And they ended up pulling away in the last few minutes of the game. They managed to get an empty netter and they managed to get a couple goals later on in the game that allowed them to separate in terms of their lead. So it felt like Columbus played a really good game, and they had a lot of engagement from their top nine, and their top nine was playing really well throughout this game. Even some of their defensemen were activating and being involved in the play, so that was a really good sign. Speaking of which, we'll start with Columbus and Damon Severson. I felt like he was a really key component to this game. 3 assists, and not traditionally an offensive defenseman, not traditionally offensive minded, but has some offensive instincts, has some rush instincts, has the ability to play heads up with his awareness and be able to maintain puck possession when necessary. And so Severson, he stood out in terms of being a possession oriented defenseman yesterday, being able to outlet, being able to find plays and find seams moving laterally as a playmaker. And I felt like his transition play in the neutral zone and then his ozone play was really noticeable in this game. And I really liked his ability to be involved in all three zones. I felt like that's part of the reason why he signed and why Columbus wanted him initially, because he can be an all three zone defenseman and he can be a reliable fit for Zach Werenski when necessary. I know they haven't played together lately. It's been Werenski paired with Dante Fabro ever since they claimed him off waivers, but I felt like Severson, this was one of the biggest standout games you'll see from him offensively. One of few standout offensive performances I've seen from him. I was really impressed. I really liked his game. Sean Monahan, who always seemed to play really well against Chicago when he was playing with Calgary in the West, and had a 2 point game, goal and assist. I felt like Monahan was noticeable from interior and being able to get inside the dots, being able to get off the wall from the corner battles in the ozone, and being able to attack with a little bit more efficiency in his shooting ability. I feel like Monahan, he's not necessarily a shooter prone type player, especially as a centerman. He's more of a guy that likes to pass and likes to delegate to teammates. But when he plays really well, he can bring a little bit of more of his scoring instincts as well, and especially around the net, being able to tuck pucks home, but also being able to muscle his way to the net by getting off the wall specifically, and did a good job with that yesterday. I felt like he was noticeable in that sense. Cole Sillinger, I really liked his game yesterday, and has had a really good season so far, and has had a bit of a comeback season for him, which is really important given the fact that you didn't necessarily know what Sillinger was going to be about 1.5 years ago when he was in the AHL and he was up and down between the AHL and the NHL. It was just kind of a weird situation. But now playing full time with them this year, he's looked really good to start the season. I've been really impressed with his game. His playmaking's there, his scoring instincts are there, the ability to play in transition in the neutral zone is there with the puck, and is a puck carrying threat. He's really elusive and he's really coordinated, which helps him be able to elude checkers in the neutral zone and be able to elude neutral zone forechecks. And he's doing a good job of that yesterday. I felt like with Sillinger, he plays with a bit more intensity and a bit more pace. So that certainly helps him in transition using his foot speed, but also using his checking ability and tenacity to be able to go after pucks on retrievals and situations like those. And then Dante Fabro, who actually had a goal in this game. I liked his game, and he stood out in terms of ozone play, ability to walk the line. He's not super flashy offensively. He's never really been a flashy offensive defenseman per se, but more of a reliable shutdown defenseman who can play and defend entries. He can defend in transition defense scenarios. He can defend the rush. He can deny sequences really effectively, close gaps, and just steadily, not super offensively oriented, like I said, but steady. He's a steady defenseman. That's the best way to describe him. And has been a really good fit with Zach Werenski on the top pairing for them thus far. I feel like he's an underrated waiver pickup and a really good waiver pickup for them to be able to have that a guy who was playing with Roman Josi in Nashville consistently bring that to Columbus and only required a waiver pickup. That's pretty good for Columbus in that sense. Ken Johnson, I liked his skill, his finesse, his flair in this game. I feel like he's been off to a really good start this season. Actually, an excellent start. Not a good start, an excellent start for him. He's just been over a point per game. He's been producing. He's been everywhere in the ozone. He's been making plays. He looks like the Ken Johnson we saw when he was at Michigan, providing all those flashy plays and those flashy ozone plays, the 10-2 Mohawks, the Michigan goals. and the lacrosse style sequences. I feel like we've seen a lot more of that from him this year again, which is really good to see. Again, another guy who's kind of in that cylinder realm, whereas like a year and a half ago, you didn't really know what he was going to be either because he was starting to slip off a little bit more. But Ken Johnson's been playing really well ever since returning from injury. Was really impressed with his game, and I really liked his game. And then Kirill Marchenko, I've really liked his game almost more than anybody else on Columbus to start the season. He's just the epitome of a power forward who can drive the outside lane. He can control space in that area, control the perimeter really well. But as a player who has learned how to score effectively off the rush and be able to be a play driver in his shooting in that sense, and I feel like with Marchenko, you notice his ability to score off the rush, his speed, and his ability to use his size and puck protection to his ability and to his advantage. I feel like Marchenko just stands out as a power forward, and he's really noticeable from that sense. He's really noticeable at creating offense as a power winger and has been right around a point per game to start the season. He has on pace to have a tremendous season and really, really good. When you look at where he's drafted, a second round pick, to where he is now in his development, it's been really impressive to watch and how he's progressed for Columbus thus far. And he just continues to get better and better. And then Ivan Provorov, I liked his game. And again, not necessarily super offensively oriented, but brings that flair and that offensively oriented game when necessary. I feel like it just pops in spurts. You don't necessarily notice it consistently, but with Provorov, he showed good two-way ability in this game, good transition ability. I felt like his offense was there. His playmaking was there. He was walking the line. He was creating offense with his feet. He was creating lanes with his feet. And again, not super flashy, but he was noticeable. And then Chicago's side, we, of course, have to talk about Connor Bedard. Once again, he had a really nice I believe it was a power play goal where the puck got worked to the bumper. So Alex Vlasic was walking the line. He was walking the line, trying to open up lane with his feet. He ended up shooting, and then the puck popped back out to Donato, who was in the bumper. And usually, when the puck gets worked to the bumper, it forces coverage to collapse. So when Columbus collapsed, they collapsed on the bumper, and that opened up the flanks. So he could pass to either side. But Donato, the way he was facing, allowed him to play to right to Bedard on the flank, on that right flank. So he played it over to Bedard, and Bedard shot it right away. It was a shot off the catch. He didn't really catch the puck in a retrieval spot. It was kind of an awkward stance that he had it in. He was kind of in an upright stance where his feet were close together, but he shot it. His stick was on the ice ready for the pass. So he just shot it. It was like a snapshot, like a half snapshot. And did a really good job executing there. I felt like with Bedard, ever since that game where he scored against Dallas a couple of nights ago, just has continued to look better and better. He's getting off the wall more. He's creating from interior. He's getting inside the dots. He's driving possession. He's stick handling and maneuvering one on one against guys. Just looks really, really different since that game in Dallas. And so it's really good to see him starting to fire up again and starting to get to where his normal level is at in terms of that generational type of talent. And it was only a matter of time, but before he was going to get back to where he was. And then Nick Polino against his former team, actually the captain of Columbus for a long time there, was an all-star in Columbus at one point, I believe back in 2015, and played really well against his former team. He had a goal. He was noticeable around the net. Of course, he's noticeable on the PK. He really defends hard. He defends with tenacity. He defends with his stick, but also defends with physicality. And he was when he was boxing out in the D zone, I felt like he was really aggressive in certain situations. Like when the puck was worked high, he wasn't afraid to be aggressive and pursue it. But there were times where he did, of course, have to drop back if the puck got worked low and deeper in the zone, where he dropped back and settled into positioning on the box out. But when the puck was worked high, he was not afraid to pinch and go after it and sometimes create rushes out of that. And individually, he did a good job of that. And offensively was noticeable, not necessarily off the rush. He's more of a straight line player through the neutral zone, but in the O zone, there's not necessarily a ton of deception to his game, but at the same time, he checks, he competes, he works. So there's a natural instinct for him to just want to work to get the puck all the time. And so he might not be the most deceptive playmaker of anybody, but he works his tail off to try and get the puck. So I feel like that kind of balances things out a little bit. So it helps him in his favor sometimes. So Felino, he had that nice goal. And then Craig Smith had a really nice tip goal. I believe it's from, I could be wrong on this, but I believe it was from Alex Vlasic from the point. So it was or no, it was Taylor Hall. It was actually Taylor Hall. Taylor Hall fired a pass to him. Craig Smith was in the slot. He was in the bumper. So he fired this pass intentionally and intentionally put a lot of heat on it. So that way, when Smith tipped it, all he had to do was slightly redirect it because then it would have more heat coming off of it. Because if Hall just passed it lightly to him, Smith would have to use an actual shooting motion to try and get it through. Whereas Hall fired it to him directly, and then all Smith had to do was just tip it and position his stick in the right way. So it made it easy for Smith. It was a really nice pass from Hall. And those playmaking instincts, when they're on from Taylor Hall. And he just does it consistently. So he's been playing really well the last few games. I feel like it wasn't the best game from Chicago. They haven't had a ton of great games. They've had a lot of close games throughout the year where they just seem to slip off towards the end of the game, but there's times where they look good and they look like they're in control. It's just more a matter of them trying to close it out later on in the game to be able to finish and get some wins there as well.